Sunrise in the Central Valley, south to Kern County and into the town of Delano, where there is religion, agriculture, stories of hope.
When I was working in the fields, I used to say, gosh, I wonder when they're going to pay, not 50 cents, but maybe $1.
And stories of Chavez.
He says the day Cesar Chavez died, that's the day I quit working in the fields.
When any person suffers for someone in greater need, that person is a human. Those are the words of Cesar Chavez, words that are still dear to many residents here in the Central Valley town of Delano. It is a town where it all began for Chavez, where he organized and where his name still echoes throughout many of the fields. It's called 40 acres, a plot of land along the Garces Highway and the birthplace of what is now the United Farm Workers of America. On the land is one cluster of buildings called the Village, and within the village is room 37. Vice President of the UFW, Armando Elenis.
You know what? Actually, I've never come in this room. First time.
Inside, a crucifix, a bed, a water pitcher, and little else. It is where Chavez publicly fasted twice.
There's a lot of history, and it's also it's kind of hard to see something when you see somebody go through that.
Through hunger strikes and other nonviolent tactics, grape boycotts, pickets, and marches, Chavez had a goal: to bring national attention to the struggles of migrant farm workers, from better pay to safer working conditions.
He was real nice person.
Friendly Delano faces from his past tell part of his story. Pauly Cardona Pasillas, then and now. Porfirio Borrell, then and now. Both say Cesar Chavez sacrificed his life for others. And both were there on April 29, 1993, the last march with Chavez. The body of Chavez was carried in a plain pine coffin built by his brother, closed by his nephew.
It came time to close the casket. It's hard to do.
Federico Chavez has many memories of his uncle and his legacy, and that legacy giving people the knowledge about the power of nonviolence using, quote, moral jiu-jitsu, he says, against a more powerful enemy.
If you're willing to put your all into it, you can change the circumstances that are keeping you oppressed.
Chavez says his uncle would often say, if you want to remember me, organize. No parks, no statues, just organize. But to be remembered in bronze with 24 other humanitarians.
It's meaningful to me. I've always thought that he was, a special person because he was my uncle and all that. But for it to be recognized in that way, is meaningful.
Cesar Estrada Chavez, a prophet to the poor and the migrant, always watching over the Central Valley of California.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
What you figure out at this stage is where's all the masses, and then how are the shadows and the highlights going to hit the figure. So we're trying to capture him right at the height of the Depression and trying to have that contemplation of how do I resolve this unbelievable problem? And then the eyes are done last. The eyes is what ties everything together. You have to make sure that when the viewer's looking at it, that's what they look at more than anything. Everything focuses on the eyes. I've got just grab some clay. I've always loved any kind of art I could get my hands on, but I was not a particularly good elementary school kid. I was kind of bored and uninterested. And then when I was about 11 years old, I was part of an experiment with the late Marcus Foster, who was the superintendent of schools. They sat me in a room and they said, here's a plunk of clay, you got to do something with it, but we're not going to tell you what to do with it. And I ended up making this head of a bearded man, and it was like the greatest moment of my life, because everything I'm doing now goes back to that. And then about a month afterwards, I said, now do you want to learn mathematics through art and history through art? And for the first time, I said yes. And how many of you think you can do stuff like this? Oh, come on. Well, rather, let me ask you, how many of you would like to do things like this? Okay, see, that's easier. And I use that same format, and the idea is to reach to kids to the inner city so that if they understand their creative power that they have.
There's so much detail.
When you're creating things, you're not destroying things. So that's really the whole concept behind all of this, is to find that inner power, and then how does that relate to yourself and to the world, and how you can make positive change.
"14-year-old Alex Bajorge Castro says he considers himself an artist, and he has found inspiration here in Oakland.
They were so amazing, and they were beautiful, they were creative. I couldn't believe it, he could do all of that. I was so inspired by him.
These sculptures of humanitarians highlight extraordinary lives, but are of people who started out in situations and worlds that teens like Alex can understand.
Many of these humanitarians did not start out as global humanitarians. They started out with a situation in their communities that wasn't right, and they felt they had to do something about it. And that is as simple a place for our own students to see their own power.
Alex's journey is still evolving. As a teen in East Oakland, he already knows struggles, but he is also learning about success.
I wasn't very good at math ever since, and now I'm starting to improve math.
A couple of years ago, Alex was struggling with a 2.5 GPA. Today, the 8th grader is turning things around.
He just came up to me yesterday and was really excited about his 3.25 he got on his report card, which is a huge improvement for him.
Alex's teachers, Dana Chiklis and Stephen Smith, say that turnaround has not been easy, especially when you consider the other challenges life brings these kids.
For a lot of my students, every day is a struggle. They see violence every day and submitted to a lot of injustice.
The Oakland Unified School District is embracing the Remember Them project. The district's curriculum will soon include lessons on these 25 humanitarians. It is history taught through art.
The kids who need art the most are totally deprived of it.
It starts very simply for Alex. A marker is his brush, a piece of paper his canvas, his muse from within.
I'm being myself by drawing.
And in his art, he sees not only who he is, but also who he can be.